Welcome to New York Voices. I'm Rafael Pi Roman. You know, back in the 80s, Richard Serra got a lot of bad press because of the tough stance he took in an effort to save Tilted Arc, his public sculpture that once stood in Federal Plaza but was ultimately destroyed by the government. In the last few years, though, Serra has gone from bad boy to favorite son and is universally regarded as one of the world's greatest living artists. I spoke to Richard Serra here at MoMA, which has mounted a 40-year retrospective of his work.
This piece is called Sequence, and what it is two torqued ellipses that are connected by an interior serpentine passage that's probably over 70 feet long. The piece itself is probably 40 by 70. What you're in now, right here in this space, is a curvilinear ellipse, which as it spirals out is the section on the floor is pretty much continuous with the section above, turned at an angle to it. And as it rises in elevation and rotates, the radius doesn't change.
I've walked through these pieces and the other pieces here a few times now, and everything you've written about them is accurate. It's disconcerting and disorienting and ultimately very satisfying. Why is disorientation and being disconcerted so pleasurable?
I really don't know how people are going to react. I don't program in effects or affects. I'm interested in forming space, and I'm interested in dislocating space. And I'm interested in space that doesn't cohere either to your anticipation or your memory. So the exploration of space throws you back on your own experience. And everybody who comes into these pieces, depending on what their baggage is, experiences them in different ways.
Talk to me about this piece, Richard.
Okay, this is a torque torus inversion. And let me explain it in the most simple terms.
Please.
If you think of a bicycle rim, or the ring on your finger, say, the ring on your finger or a bicycle rim, if you think of the bicycle rim where the tube goes around, that part is concave. If you think of the inside of the bicycle rim, that part's convex, coming out at you. Now, if you took the bicycle rim and made it 13 feet high, it's a circle. So let's stretch the bicycle ring out to 33 feet long on one axis and 27 feet on the other end. So now it's an ellipse. Now you take that bicycle rim, and this is the part you have to follow, and you take the top edge of the bicycle rim and you rotate it to the bottom edge at a right angle.
That's the torquing.
That's the torquing. So it's a torqued torus inversion. So it both curves this way, and then it rotates. The rotation is something that's never been done in the history of form making. Now we're going to walk into the second half of this piece and watch what happens here.
And that is the inversion.
Yes, that's the inversion. And so basically we've taken that form and dumped it upside down. As the other piece opened outward, this piece almost like a volcano. You really feel the space compressing inward. Since it pushes you down to the center, right? The other one, you really thought, oh, expansive, up, out. This one, boom.
Right. And the other one seems lighter to me in any event.
Yeah, that's right. And you sense the physical gravity of this space. You're much more grounded in this space.
And this next piece,
Band.
it's called Band.
Yeah. And this piece for me is really the new template in the show, in that the inscription of this piece on the floor is quite regular. But when you walk this piece, every part and particle of it changes in its undulation. As it unfolds, nothing repeats. And even though it seems very regular, there's 4 cavities. You walk into one, you come out of the other, you think, I've been there before, and that when you really look at it, you think, what I thought was similar is dissimilar, and it keeps unfolding as you walk, and it seems unending, almost like walking a Moebius strip, perceptually.
That's right.
So there's really no inside and outside. The inside and outside becomes contradictory. You think, I'm in the inside of the outside of the inside, and as it keeps unfolding, that's what happens.
Now, is it possible to experience your work truly if you don't participate in it, if you don't personally interact with it?
No, there's no content. See, that's how it differs than other work. Like, if you take, say, objects on a pedestal, or you take things are within a frame, then the subject matter is inscribed in the representation. We look at Cézanne's apples, and we know the subject matter is that content. Here, you come, you walk in this room, and you are the subject of your own experience.
And the experience is the space and the metal together.
Yeah, and the experience is making the space palpable. It's making the space, the void, as much material as the wraparound of the skin. You can just come in here and have an experience that's yours and yours alone. And then what happens in a space like this, even though it's very private, you get, like on a Friday afternoon when the space is free here, you get 5,000 to 6,000 people in here. And then a strange thing happens. You're in a public space where people are having a private experience, and that becomes shared in a communal way.
Richard, you started out studying literature, if I'm not mistaken. Was that a wrong road that you had to do a U-turn on, or was that the road that ultimately, in part, led you to this, to your art?
I think everything leads to everything else. I think the more you can bring to whatever you do, the better. The more grounded you are in the diversity of culture, the better.
Now, how important was Yale for your development?
Well, at Yale, I was in the same school with Bryce Martin and Chuck Close and Nancy Graves, and the school was going through a transition. So every week they would bring up different visiting critics. So in a given period of time, you'd have people like Rauschenberg, Stella, Guston, Morty Feldman, Robert Frost, continuously. Now, Robert Frost not only came to the art school, but he also gave university lectures. So there was a continuous influx of people who would come in and critique your work.
I've read that you wrote that as a student, you ended up painting something that looked like renditions of abstract expressionism somewhere between Pollock and de Kooning.
Yeah.
We talked to Chuck Close, and he told us that his experience was similar. Was this influence something that was inevitable given the times?
I think that's what students do. I think students thumb through history books, thumb through the currency of history, and try to mimic what's going on to see if they can come up to what they think is the expertise or what they revere at the moment. So it's something you learn, but you're never under any illusion when you're a student that you're doing anything but student work. So I knew immediately that I was doing student work, and I knew when I got out of school I had to drop it, and I did.
It wasn't difficult to get out of that influence to...
I went to France. I got a Yale traveling and went to France. I went and looked at Brancusi very heavily, and I'd never made any sculpture before, and started drawing in Brancusi's studio every day. I haunted the cupola at night and sat across from Giacometti because he looked like somebody that came right out of the studio working every day, had plaster stuck in his ear. And Phil Glass and I would go, and we were groupies. We were student groupies. Well, I didn't want to make work like Giacometti, but they empowered us with a certain effort that they sustained. And they were working artists living in France, and you could go and be physically across from them. So it took them off of the plateau of being something other than a real person. They weren't these like walking geniuses. It made them real for you that they were eating moule in front of you, but it also built up a tremendous admiration of empowerment, that people could work all day and come in and have in the 2 o'clock in the morning and have a glass of wine and go right back to work the next day.
And I'm trying to think of the connection between that, how that impressed you, and the fact that you were a worker, that you came from working class family, that you worked in the steel mills. Was there a connection there?
Okay, I think actually it's interesting because I came from a very poor family. I think there's something about people who work every day understand the nature of the feedback that in and of itself is fulfilling. And that may have been lost in this generation that exists right now, I'm not sure. But I know I grew up with look, I came through a generation where Phil Glass worked steel mills as a crane operator. Carl Andre worked railroads. Bob Morris worked stockyards. I worked steel mills. I could probably go on that way. So I came after a generation after the war that paid their way through school by working blue collar.
Now, is it safe to say that you went to Europe as a painter and you came back as a sculptor?
That's right, yeah.
And you moved to New York when, in the late 60s?
67, beginning of 67.
Talk to me about the art scene in New York in the 60s.
It was very small. I started a moving company, and in the moving company, we were called Low Rate Movers, was Phil Glass, Steve Reich, both composers, Michael Snow, Canadian filmmaker, Chuck Close, a painter, Spalding Gray, actor, and countless other people who were in the downtown scene. And we had one truck. We would each work 2 days a week and have 5 days off, and it kept us all going for about 2 years. And what was interesting about the group, there was a lot of cross-fertilization that went on. So it wasn't about what you wanted to make in particular. It was about ideas of time, movement, process, space, language. All of us shared something that was common in terms of political necessity, obsession with repetition and serial movement, the idea that matter, whatever matter it was, whatever material you're working with, imposes its own form on form. If you're working with sound, it imposes its form on form. If you're working with steel, it imposes its form on form. If you're working with language, it imposes its form on form. So matter itself, unlike theory, has its own properties and logic that you have to pay attention to if you're going to do anything with it. The reason I'm being able to make 550 tons of steel weightless is that I understand the fact that material in itself has its own conditions that you have to respect. If you take someone like Louis Kahn, he said, I look at a brick and I ask it what it wants to be, because it has a logic built into its geometry. I think all of us at that time understood that we agreed on a certain premise. And we had no idea that we were all going to develop or evolve into what we've become.